Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Ryan Wood, back at Lambeau yet again after last weekend for rookie minicamp, which has now, I guess, officially wrapped up just about.
We live here.
We do live here.
We have a
yes.
fridge, a microwave. We live here.
I have a fridge that I'm considering getting the matching microwave for.
It's
wow.
That's a whole nother level of appliance that I've never considered.
Oh, there go players down the.
This is the one interesting time of the year where, because there's 51 players in for rookie minicamp, there's an excess of players. I mean, they're not going to take Aaron Rodgers' locker, right? So all the veterans have their locker. Because of the excess, the overflow is in the opponent locker room, which happens to be down our office. So this is the time of year we always see Packers players, the tryout guys, undrafted free agents, whoever, walking back and forth and just, hey, how you doing? It's always very interesting.
Yeah, as he said, 51 players, 11 draft picks, 14 UDFAs, 18 tryout players, and then 8 current players who had less than the parameter of accrued hours on the active roster, so they were able to come back for rookie minicamp as well. Ryan, Matt LaFleur was asked today how important it is to have these tryout players here because they weren't able to do that during COVID, and then to also have some of the current players back. What did you take from what he said, and what sort of a difference does it make? Because, as we were out there at practice and I was looking around and I was thinking about how many guys were out there, it occurred to me we're 2 guys short of an active roster during the season. Yeah. So they're able to run pretty much a full practice by having this many guys.
And they're, a lot of tryout guys. What's the number on tryout guys? 18 tryout players. And that's for what? 1 spot? 2 spots? The roster's at 88 or 89. So it's, it's a lot of competition out there. With that said, Matt LaFleur said today that they kind of dialed back today. And if you watch practice, it was a dialed back version of yesterday because they had a couple strains and a couple of exertion type stuff. Nothing serious, it sounds like, but
just being careful.
Yeah, just kind of precautious, which if you know anything about Matt LaFleur and practicing, he's cautious with his players' bodies. He has been since he was hired. So, but it's competitive. I mean, these guys are going for spots.
Yeah, we had a up close look, especially at the offensive linemen, including Ryan, one of the biggest guys I've seen on a football field since Terrence Cody. Do you remember Mount Cody? Yeah, he played for Alabama, then he played for the Ravens. He's number 72 right there. That is Caleb Jones, tackle from Indiana. And we focus on him because he's huge, so it's hard for your eye not to go to him. It seems to me like they added a lot of bulk through this rookie minicamp, through the draft, through UDFAs. Did you get that same sense as well? And how important was that, especially after how last season ended, to add some of that bulk?
Well, there's no question that the 3 offensive linemen drafted, the first 2 picks, really big inside linebacker and Quay Walker is huge. I was standing next to him in the locker room yesterday. I don't know if I've ever craned my neck straight up to look at an inside linebacker. That was me. I'm looking at Quay Walker like that.
Right.
6'4", every bit of 6'4", and that's an inside linebacker. Usually these guys are 6'1", 6'2". It's pretty eye level. And Devontae Wyatt, huge guy. And Matt LaFleur said today that he's just in shorts. It's not pads, not 11 on 11, but the movement skills are very clear for this guy. He went 304. They shut the lights off. 304, 310, 6'3", 4'7", 40. So, to answer your question, they certainly added a lot of bulk. But Caleb Jones, Matt LaFleur said that Caleb Jones is the largest player that he's ever coached. And I'm sure that at 6'9", 370 pounds, Matt LaFleur's not the only I think it's something I said.
It is.
Not the only player that he's coached not the only coach in the league.
Yeah, as we see him here again go. You're speaking of Quay Walker as well, who I think you can see in the background there. And he picked off a couple of passes during these one-on-one drills, these 7-on-7 drills. He talked about his height and how much I know, again, this is just what we can call the underwear Olympics, but how much is his height able to be used to his advantage as well, sort of over the middle of the field there?
Yeah, he's tall, he's long, so he's very rangy. The thing with Quay Walker, he's a former really, really talented high school receiver. He started at receiver, actually, before he became a linebacker, and he played receiver like a linebacker. And if there's an option of whether you make a guy miss or run him over. He just ran him over, and his coach was like, "Oh, okay, let's move him to linebacker," and the rest is history. But he's got ball skills. I mean, he's a really athletic guy with a history of catching the ball. And you can see that, in these first couple of days. Now, when it's 11 on 11 and things are a lot more complicated, especially for an inside linebacker that has to read and diagnose everything, how those ball skills translate to that situation is the question. But in terms of just pure natural ball skills, I mean, he's got that. I must say, this is how we work. We work in the dark, so you're getting the authentic feel. This is the Packers News office at Lambeau Field.
I think
we like it.
Dark in here.
We like it dim. It's nice and dim. There's one working light, and you got a light there. So 2 working lights in
here. Jacques asked a very good question. Is there anyone from the UDFAs or the tryouts you think they might hang on to so far? Granted, it's hard to kind of get a sense of these guys within 2 days of rookie minicamp. Ryan, I don't know about for you, but for me, Kiki Chisholm, the wide receiver out of Missouri, stuck out, and that may be just because he was so tall. He seemed so much taller for some reason than the other receivers. And he had a couple of different balls, especially today, where he really bodied up the guy he was lined up against, whether it be a DB, whether it be a linebacker, and he just, like I said, bodied him up and caught some really physical, tough catches. So he stood out to me. Was there anyone that stood out to you, or like they said, is it sort of too early to kind of see that?
Too early. I'd like to see special teams drills before I can really kind of pinpoint some guys, because that's where these guys are going to make the roster. I mean, whatever they can do on special teams. It's early, but there's always 1 or 2 every camp. I mean, they show up, and this is a team in the Packers that has a long history of keeping UDFAs on the roster.
Yeah, and Brett asked the same thing. This is where they kind of make their money and they get their chance. Also today, Wisconsin guy Danny Davis had a couple of really impressive catches as well. And so he'll be one to watch. I think he's here as a UDFA, right? Not a tryout. Correct. He is here as a free agent. So he's someone to watch as well. We know that they want to restock that receiver room. So I'll build on that question. Do you think that they would feasibly restock it through some of these free agents, or possibly even maybe one of the tryout players?
The opportunity is there. It's a crowded. What they need is a number 1. I mean, they've got depth. They got Sammy Watkins. They've got Alan Lazard. They've got Randall Cobb, and they've got some depth guys there. Amari Rogers is what. I mean, that's when things get going. There's going to be a lot of emphasis on Amari Rogers this offseason. Can he put last year behind him or not? The undrafted guys. Jared Abbrederis was a guy. I think he might have been 7th round, 6th round pick, but he was a guy that came in, big name. Obviously Wisconsin made some plays. I mean, you look at what Jared Abbrederis did. It was very successful for him, but he, in terms of production, it was very, very little. I mean, if you get anything out of these guys, late round, undrafted, it's a surprise.
Of course, the guy that they're hoping to get the most out of is Christian Watson. General Manager Brian Gutekunst said after they drafted him, even though he has MVS's measurables, he's bigger jointed. We were very curious to see what that means. Ryan, having now seen him in person, I get what he's saying. He's broader than MVS was, especially in the shoulders.
Not hard to do, by the way.
That's very true. What did you kind of see of him? And we do have some video of him as well.
Tell me to stop if I need to stop.
Ashes today in the one-on-ones that I thought were impressive. Yesterday, his hands were inconsistent. He had 2 drops on air. That the big knock on him coming into this level is whether or not his hands are going to be consistent enough in the NFL. So we've lost Kassidy. She's over somewhere else. I don't know where she went. So I'm just going to keep talking. He's big. I mean, the size is there. He can move. It's just about being able to get consistent with the hands, picking up the playbook and NFL strength and adjust to the NFL game.
Yes.
I don't know what Kassidy's doing.
As he was saying, we are professionals. Do not try this at home. You said also about Devontae Wyatt, and actually we've got some questions here too, so let's hop into these as well. The very good question from Jacques. How did it feel for the Packers beat to interview players back in the locker room?
It felt like normal. it felt like the way it's supposed to feel. And the biggest part of that is that it helps you, the fan. There's so much more that information, conversation that we can get to relay to you by being in a personable setting, an actual conversation, instead of being at the podium or getting your one question in on Zoom. Because that's why we do it. We do this for you guys. So it's a much better format. But how did it feel? I mean, it was surprising how quickly it felt like normal again. I mean, it's been over 2 years. It's late January 2020 since they opened those doors, right after the 2019 NFC Championship game in San Francisco. The locker room right after the season is the last time they were open. So it felt good to be back in there.
Marty said I was checking on the Bucks game. I do have the Bucks game going right here.
She does.
It's currently 99 to 100. Oh, Giannis with a layup. It's 101 to 100.
She cares a lot about this.
44 seconds left to play.
She's the person in Wisconsin that cares about basketball before the finals.
If you see me start to grimace, you know what's going on. We had a couple of questions up here. Aaron, hey Aaron, how's it going? Where do I stand on quarterback wins and losses? Are they a real stat?
She stands with the good.
Aaron,
we had this conversation during the draft.
Were you in here the other day when we had this conversation? I'm trying to remember if you were.
With the good.
To me, they're part of the gate. Like they're a decent quarterback finds a way to win, and they may not do it in a pretty way, but they are the crux around what the whole game operates 9 times out of 10.
Touch the ball every play.
You have to have a dynamic defense for the quarterback to not matter. And even then, the quarterback has to not mess up. And so for the quarterback to not mess up, that's calling him a game manager, which is not the knock that some people think it is. And so to me, quarterback wins and losses are a real stat. They are important.
Thank you.
And I know that this was the game that me and you and our colleague Pete Doherty brought up. And I know this is probably painful for Packers fans, but you look at the 49ers. Jimmy G gets a lot of knocks as a bad quarterback, but they win when he's on the field and they lose when he doesn't. I feel like that's a stat that has to.
I want to say something. This was the point when we actually talked about this during the draft. It was the two of us and Pete Doherty, our colleague. The thing I feel like people who don't believe wins are a quarterback stat look at is that it's like somehow detracting from the team. Like, no, it's a record. Like it's a team stat. But every stat is team and individual in football.
They have all those stats work together.
Team rushing yard or individual rushing yards. Team yards per carry or individual yards per carry. It's absolutely an individual and a team stat. Whether or not you can win, every single personnel director, GM, scout, if they're head coach, if they're evaluating quarterbacks, the exact first question they ask is whether or not the guy can win. That's every single one. I'm not making that up. Every single one asks that first question.
I think Aaron disagrees with us.
It's a quarterback stat, and it is a team stat, just like rushing yards.
Aaron, I'm sorry you're wrong. I'm sorry.
I love you, Aaron, though.
Okay, let's get back to the rookies. Christopher asked, how will the new wide receivers change the dynamic of the team? Christopher, not only is this a great question, it's a question all three of them were asked yesterday. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Samari. Ryan, I know I was there when Romeo answered this question. Were you able to hear these guys as well kind of talk about what they want to do as a trio? And if you weren't, what do you think they can do as a trio, considering they are all so different?
Yeah, I mean, Christian Watson's here to play receiver. Romeo Doubs and Samari Toure are guys that are going to have to cut it on special teams first. So they're in a very different situation. As a second round pick that you paid the farm to go get, compared to a fourth rounder, compared to a seventh rounder, very different situations. With that said, I mean, the two back end guys, the two day three guys, they've got impressive measurables, size, speed. I mean, they've got tools there that frankly are going to be very helpful on special teams potentially. First, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was a 5th round pick. Equanimity St. Brown was a 6th round pick. Romeo Doubs and Samari Toure, absolutely, they were going to get a chance to play. What they do with it is up to them.
Doubs particularly had a couple of different plays today that I jotted down notes for. It seemed like he always had a step on the guy, Oh my gosh. Woo.
The Packers News Facebook Live brought to you by the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't know what just happened.
Al Horford just tied it as the time expired. They're going to go to overtime.
I care very much about this.
Anyways, okay. Dubs had a couple of different plays today where it seemed like he had a noticeable step on the guy. So I know we've looked at Christian Watson for speed, but could Romeo be a guy that kind of sneaks in there and becomes their downfield guy?
Yeah, I mean, he ran 4.5, so I think 4.5 flat, maybe high 4.5. What did he run at pro day? I can't remember. Do you remember what he ran at pro day?
I do not remember what he ran at his pro day. He only ran at his pro day, I believe.
His interesting thing with him is that he ran a 4.75 at a high school, and that's why he was lightly recruited. Your receiver, you run 4.75, you're not going to get a lot of major college offers. And then he was a punt returner. And he showed speed at Nevada, and he's a guy that has drastically improved his speed. He's still not a burner. He's still not a guy he's not Christian Watson. He's not 4.36, but he's a guy whose speed is not going to be detrimental to him potentially having a career. It's going to be more on his route running and obviously his consistency with his assignments, his hands, his technique, all that.
They called the basket off. Game's over. Bucks won. 103 to 101.
She cares a lot about this.
My Florida heart hates it for Al Horford, but
he is from Florida, isn't he?
Yeah, he was a Billy Donovan guy.
I've been trying to understand the connection here.
That may be close. Anyways, yeah, let's get back to Packers.
Let's do that.
One or two more questions here. Good one from Jacques. Okay, I'm glad somebody asked this because I wanted to talk about him. He asked, I heard Bisaccia was getting players to catch tennis balls on special teams drills. Have you seen an initial difference on special teams coaching versus last year? I'm going to let Ryan take this and run with it, but before he does, this has nothing to do with the tennis balls, but when
basketball?
Not either. That's over.
Okay.
When we were there for warm-ups, I thought it was really interesting how you saw, of course, the strength coach leading the warm-ups and then Matt LaFleur walking through and talking to the players. That's very common. That's not weird of course, the head coach usually is walking through. The only other coach out there during that time, and again, it's rookie minicamp. It's not in the middle of the season, but the only other coach out there was Rich Bisaccia. And usually if you see a position coach out there, they're just kind of with their guys. Special teams is every guy pretty much, especially with this weekend. And he was roaming the aisles, talking to each guy, much like a head coach would carry himself at practice. And I saw him do the same thing during practice today as well, because after seeing that, I kind of watched him. Whatever was going on, Rich Bisaccia was kind of right there in the middle of it. And he had his special team specialist that he was taking care of, but he was also kind of in the middle of everybody the whole time. Again, much like a head coach would be. And I think it's interesting that he's had so much head coaching experience in the past, always as an interim. But if you look back, he's had a decent little amount. And Matt LaFleur, for all of his accolades and well-deserved, is still pretty young. And Rick Bisaccia has been doing this for a long time. And so I thought for whatever he can bring on special teams, he could also bring a lot to this coaching staff as just an experienced, knowledgeable voice.
Matt LaFleur talked about that at the owners' meeting too, that he thought that Rich Bisaccia's whole demeanor, his personality, was something that would matriculate to the rest of the roster and really feed off and extend beyond just special teams. With that said, other than receiver, their biggest need in this draft, their biggest need this offseason, special teams, right? I mean, they've got to get better there. So that's where the emphasis is. That's the focal point for him. And he's always kind of had this knack as, this reputation as a really energetic guy like that mixes it up and does those sort of things. So, yeah, we're just getting a first glimpse of it. Mm-hmm. It's something once training camp starts and even the OTAs and they get the veterans in, it'll be a much better barometer. But certainly, I mean, he's an energetic guy.
Brett says he's loving the Bucks commentary, so you will get that next time too.
You get 1 point.
Last question here. Phantom193 says, after so many years of picking players from non-SEC schools, it's encouraging to see them go 2 years in a row in the SEC. Maybe they're seeing that they tend to be more pro-ready. Ryan, you have a story about this coming out. Go ahead and tell everybody what they can be on the lookout for.
Yeah, so, I talked with Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker day one of rookie minicamp about the culture they come from, right? I mean, they're loaded with talent on that defensive side of the ball at Georgia. And so when they play here for the Packers, it's not going to be the first time that they're played surrounded by professionals on a football field. With that said, I asked Quay Walker about this yesterday. The intricacies of their defense was much more advanced than what you typically find in college. And he wouldn't go into detail, but Georgia's 3-4 defense is very what Kirby Smart does there. There's a lot of NFL flavor to what he does, which, especially at an inside linebacker, schematics are the key to that position. And it's an instinctual field position. And to be able to have that grounding in something so complex and intricated like a Kirby Smart defense, it's something that should only help the transition to the NFL. Culture and schematics, it certainly should help.
And they double dipped into the SEC, not only in the first round, but again when they went with JJ from South Carolina, and some of these UDFAs are all from SEC schools as well. So like you said, could be more pro ready. Okay, guys, we are going to go finish up the rest of our work, wrapping up rookie minicamp. You can be on the lookout for full coverage and wrap-ups, focused features on some of these new players on PackersNews.com, in JS Online, and, of course, Green Bay Press-Gazette over the next couple of days. The guys are going to head home next week, so we might take a little bit of a backseat as well, and then they will be back, I believe, at the end of next week, right? Or a week from Monday, I think, is when they'll be back. It won't be long.
It won't be long.
Short little break. Short little break. And then the veterans will be back. It will be voluntary, of course, but they will be folded in with these rookies as well. And we'll really kind of start to get an idea of what the 2022 Green Bay Packers will look like. So that'll be exciting. Till then, stick to PackersNews.com for full coverage. Thanks, guys.